All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be continuing on our homebrewing adventure by looking at what a lot of people consider the kind of red-headed stepchild of Dungeons and Dragons, the Bard. Now, before we get too far, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super important in order for other people to be able to see this, and lets me know that you like this stuff. So, the Bard. The Bard is the Bard is an interesting beast. Showing up, I believe, as early as advanced D&D first edition, whatever you want to call it. The Bard has been a weird class for a long time. In early versions of D&D, like, again, in advanced D&D, you really didn't get many bards because they were remarkably difficult to actually create a character. You had to have certain class levels to make things work, and you had to have certain skills at certain places, and they were just weird. As you kept going forward, the idea of the bard kind of changed. When by the time it got to second edition, the bard was actually kind of a specialized version of a rogue, and actually shared quite a few abilities of the rogue. When you get into the third edition, they started kind of introducing the more magical aspects of it. And I think that might have existed in the second edition as well. I can't 100% remember. But they were still kind of in a strange place. Fourth edition was just weird, and then in fifth edition we get the bard that we know today. The bard is a full spellcaster compared to earlier versions where it was kind of a half caster kind of thing, despite the fact that it didn't really exist. It was not as powerful as like a wizard or a sorcerer or anything like that. Here it's got the same number of spells as sorcerers and wizards. And druids and clerics, all the full casters has all this is the same. But because of just kind of the odd placement it's had in D&D for a very long time, a lot of people are still kind of underwhelmed by the bard. It tends to not be a particularly popular class, though a lot of that changed when Scanlan Shorthalt became a thing, but it's still kind of a misunderstood class. So that's what we're going to look at today, is the Bard in 5th edition, the defining features, and how you can homebrew things to create some really unique bards in general. So, quick refresher on 5th edition class design. In 5th edition D&D, every class is designed to be very differently right from the beginning. In order to do this, these classes have what we call defining features. A defining feature is either something unique to the class, or maybe it's not unique, but they get it earlier or can use it differently than any other class. For the Bard, and in order for something to be a defining feature, it needs to show up within the first 2 levels. For the Bard, there's actually 4 different features that they get within the first 2 levels. They are Spellcasting, Bardic Inspiration, Jack of all trades, and Song of Rest. So we're going to cover each one of those and talk kind of how it is a defining feature. So the first thing we have to talk about is spellcasting. I mentioned this in my Sorcerer video. The Bard's spellcasting is not unique. It is actually almost word for word identical to the Sorcerer's spellcasting feature. And we talked about how the Sorcerer spellcasting was a defining feature. It had to be a defining feature. It's a full spellcaster. You are going to be casting spells a lot. We talked about for this as a Sorcerer, the defining feature aspect of it generally came from its subclass, because you choose the subclass of this as a sorcerer right at level 1. Well, for the Bard, you don't get your subclass until level 3. And there's nothing really unique about the spellcasting itself. Like I said, it's almost identical, or it's effectively identical to the sorcerer's spellcasting feature. The difference is really going to be the spell list. Effectively, we mentioned that in the sorcerer, their spell list is a little bit different. The bard spell list is significantly different than really any other class. There's actually a few spells that are unique to the bard. They tend to involve music or wordplay or something like that. Probably the most common one that all bards will pick up is the cantrip called Vicious Mockery. And it is a widely useful cantrip, not really from a damage perspective. It does a d4 damage. Even at level 1, that's not really anything to write home about. But it makes it more difficult for the creature that gets hit with it to do other things. It actually adds a penalty to rolls that they the next roll that they make. So it's a pretty interesting thing, and that's kind of how Bard spellcasting tends to work. Now, when you choose your subclass, most of them will modify spellcasting in some way, shape, or form. Again, this is a full caster, so it does still have that defining feature aspect in the idea that, well, yes, your subclasses are going to modify it in some way. But as the bard levels up, there's also other things that happen that kind of modify how the spellcasting feature works, and that's at level 10 they get magical secrets, which lets them choose 2 spells from any classes, and it effectively means that by level 10 and a little earlier, depending on your subclass, you can actually learn any spell. As long as you have the spell slots for it. Like, you can't learn the wish spell because you don't have the spell slots for it at level 10. But any spell that you have slots for, you can learn. And like I said, there's a few, there's at least one subclass I remember that we'll be talking about today that actually gives you that ability a little bit earlier. And that's kind of what really kind of defines the bard, and has defined the bard, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of people have not been super fond of the bard, is the idea that the bard can do a lot of different things. Jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. And their spell list kind of exemplifies that. There are some uniquely bard spells, yes, but they take spells from a bunch of different spell lists. They take some cleric spells, they take some wizard spells. They just have a really kind of interesting conglomerate of spells to make their spell list very much a very customizable thing. Now, bards still learn spells. They don't prepare them like wizards do from their spell book, or like clerics or druids do just from their spell list in general. So you do have to choose the spells that you learn. However, just like the sorcerer, as you level up, you can replace spells. Basically, one spell per level. Whenever you level up, you can just switch out with another one. So it's not quite as game-breaking as it could be if you choose a spell that's just not something that works for your particular playstyle. You'll eventually be able to switch that spell out and get other ones that just fit your character a little more. But yeah, without going into the full spell list, it's really hard to comment on the spellcasting of any class. And going into the spellcasting, the spell list of any class, is a video series in and of itself. So I won't be doing that, but that's really the only kind of unique thing of the spellcasting feature for the bard, is the list is unique. And that's cool, and this is interesting, but the subclasses are really where you start getting things to be a little bit more customized. So spellcasting, per my definition that I say in every one of these videos, is a tough sell for a defining feature. But it's a full spellcaster, and a lot of the subclasses deal with that spellcasting aspect as you go. So, moving on. The next ability that you get at first level is called Bardic Inspiration. And this is the defining feature that everybody thinks about in 5th edition. Now, Bardic Inspiration is a unique ability, and it leads into one of the things that make bards probably one of the strongest classes when played well, and one of the most frustrating classes when played poorly. And that is the idea that the bard is a support class, and Bardic Inspiration really helps to exemplify that support aspect. The way Bardic Inspiration does is you use a bonus action, and you can inspire someone. And by inspiring them, you give them a Bardic Inspiration die. It starts at a D6, eventually gets up to a D12. And what it is they can make a roll, and they can add that Bardic Inspiration to one ability check, attack roll, or saving throw that it makes within the next 10 minutes. That is a huge number of things. And specifically, it mentions the creature can wait until after it rolls the d20 before deciding to use the Bardic Inspiration die, but must decide before the DM says whether the roll succeeds or fails. So this is something that you're never really going to waste the Bardic Inspiration, or you're not going to be wasting it as much because you don't have to choose right at the beginning. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and add my Bardic Inspiration. Then you get a nat 20. It's like, well, I didn't need to do that. No, anytime you're rolling it, you're going to need to roll it because you get to see your die roll beforehand. But it leans into that idea of support. And when I mention that the Bard can be one of the strongest or one of the weakest classes, it's entirely based on who are you giving out these inspirations to. And knowing what you can do with your Bardic Inspiration. The Bardic Inspiration here is pretty simple. It's pretty useful. But I believe every subclass, if not almost every subclass, gives you an additional way to use your Bardic Inspiration. And that's when you really start getting creative. Because not only do you need to know your character, but generally you also need to know the characters that your party is playing. Because giving your Bardic Inspiration to a ranger with the sharpshooter feat and the archery fighting style, well, they're already hitting most of their attacks. They're not worrying about cover or anything like that. They probably don't need a Bardic Inspiration for that. But the rogue, who is currently dealing with a really, really high AC creature, maybe they need it a little bit more. Or when you're going into a situation where you need to climb a wall, maybe you don't need to give Bardic Inspiration to the barbarian who already has a super high strength score, so their athletics check is going to be simple, but maybe giving it to the wizard who has a negative strength score is going to be the thing that really helps the group out. And because it can be used on ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws, it means knowing who is going to need it for what is going to be the most useful. If you've got a barbarian on your team and you're dealing with someone that uses mind control magic, give them a Bardic Inspiration and tell them not to use it until they have to make that wisdom saving throw with their negative wisdom modifier. So the key to playing a bard correctly and having the most fun as a bard is knowing your team and knowing the enemy. And depending on your subclass, you may need to know one or the other better or worse. Simply because depending on the other things you can use your Bardic Inspiration for, if your Bardic Inspiration allows you to maybe make enemies roll disadvantage or something, or subtract things from their rolls. Well, knowing which enemy is going to do the most damage or is going to have the best chance of it being useful against them is going to be really important. And that's one of the things that makes the Bard sometimes kind of difficult to play. And it's something that kind of turns off some people because it requires a little bit more work. Now, the nice thing about this is when you play with the same group enough, you generally start, just from playing with them long enough, you generally start to learn their ins and outs just from playing with them. So it's not like you have to sit there and go, okay, everyone give me your character sheet so I can learn everything. No, get in combat, talk to the other players, learn what they do and what they don't, and after you've leveled a few times with a group, you're going to learn who needs that Bardic Inspiration the best. So yeah, when you're homebrewing the things, finding different ways to use Bardic Inspiration is an essential part of your subclasses, to be blunt. I've mentioned this before. I really, really like dice pools as a limited resource. And Bardic Inspiration, you have... you can use this feature of number of times equal to your charisma modifier minimum of once. You gain any expended usage when you finish a long rest. So it's based on your charisma modifier, but it is a dice pool. It starts out as D6s. So at first level, you probably have a 16 for your charisma score, because that's a pretty standard starting charisma for a bard. So that would be 3 D6s that you get to keep. Finding different ways to use these D6s is an essential part of your homebrewing. And understand that those dice get bigger real quick. They become a D8 at 5th level, a D10 at 10th level, and a D12 at 15th level. A D6 is already a +6 to anything in D&D 5th edition is a pretty big increase. A +12 is massive. So understand when you are using this, if you are somehow giving them the ability to use their Bardic Inspiration for damage, well, a D12 of damage is okay, don't get me wrong, but you're using it for something like armor class, well, that is a really, really big thing, and you need to really look at what you're doing and the limitations you're putting on, because if you make it too simple, then, giving a paladin who already has an AC of like 21 or to 22, which is not difficult for a paladin to do, a D12 that allows them to add 12 to their AC, that brings them up to a 34. An impossible roll in D&D 5th edition is a 30. That is meant to be impossible. So you have just turned a paladin into something that is technically impossible to hit. So understand, when you're homebrewing and coming up with new ways to use the Bardic Inspiration die, understand that the die gets bigger, and understand kind of the bounded accuracy built into 5th edition. And when you're using that and adding whatever is rolled to something, understand that's how it's going to go. Also understand, if you are adding the die to damage, if you have them roll the Bardic die as damage, that means for crits, they roll 2 instead of 1. Whereas if you have them roll the die and add the number rolled to the damage, that number is now a flat modifier. It is not an additional die, and it does not get doubled for critical hits. That can be a really, really simple way to balance an ability. Is if it is a damage roll that you want to add as a use of Bardic Inspiration, simply changing it from add the Bardic Inspiration right to the damage roll, compared to roll the Bardic Inspiration die and add the number rolled to the damage roll. It's a really easy way to balance it and prevent it from being too broken. So yes, moving on. At 2nd level, you get Jack of all trades. Now, this is the thing that has kind of defined the Bard since its inception. Bardic Inspiration is kind of based in 3rd edition, I know. I don't know about 2nd or 1st edition, but in 3rd edition, I know Bards actually had the ability to use their turn to play a song that could inspire their allies, and it would give them a floating modifier buff. That's kind of where Bardic Inspiration came from, and I believe there was other versions of that as you went back in time. Jack of all trades is the other thing that has existed since the beginning of the Bard, and it was the idea that bards can do a lot of different things. Jack of all trades in 5th edition, you can add half your proficiency bonus rounded down to any ability check you make that doesn't already include your proficiency bonus. So you are effectively half trained in everything, or half proficient in everything, and then there's certain things that you are proficient in. You eventually get expertise at 3rd level, which kind of fits into the Jack of all trades in the idea that things that you are an expert in you had double your proficiency bonus. So all those things kind of fit into the idea that bards can fill a lot of roles in a party. Even if you don't build them that way, having a +2 instead of a +0 is still better. Or having a +4 instead of a +1 can be a massive, massive difference. And it just gets higher and higher and higher as you go. Yeah, Jack of all trades. This is another thing where the bard really needs to understand the party pretty well as well. Just because you can go, well, I'm Jack of all trades. I can try any role. And maybe your party. I actually had this happen in one of the D&D Adventures Leagues game I played. We had an adventure that was this little kind of puzzle style delve where you go into this mausoleum and you have to go into these different rooms and solve up a puzzle. Well, the way that you solve the puzzle was entirely using investigation checks. The only way to get the clues and the abilities that you needed, and the items that you needed to complete this dungeon was DC 20 investigation checks. And we didn't have anyone trained in investigation. There's actually a few that were DC 25. We had no one that was trained in investigation. We didn't have an intelligence-based character in the party, which normally isn't a huge issue. There's other ways around that, but this particular module was just written that you had to have someone that could make these 20 and 25 investigation checks. If you didn't, there was nothing you could do. There was no alternate way to get through it. You just had to make those rolls. So something like Jack of all trades, you can go, okay, well, maybe I'm not trained in investigation, but again, a +2 is better than a +0, or a -1, which a lot of us had intelligence as our dumb stat. Again, Adventurers League, you just had random people show up at the table, or sign up for the table. They didn't just walk up generally, but they would sign up for a game and they'd bring the character that they wanted, but you generally didn't have a set group. You just had random people that showed up. So that stuff could happen. And that's really where Jack of all trades can be very, very useful. It also means when you're playing the rogue, you can be a lot more, you can be a little bit more gung-ho when you're going into situations, because you're never going to have a situation where you don't have something you can add to the roll. Aside from negative modifiers, which really, the worst in most parties, the worst you're going to have is like an 8 in an ability score if using the standard array, which is a -1, meaning as soon as you get Jack of all trades, you have a +1. So you'll never have a negative modifier to any of your checks. That means you can go a little bit crazy and do some different things. When you're homebrewing for Jack of all trades, that's another thing that you need to kind of take into account, is the bard can fit into a lot of different places. So if you are coming up with a homebrew subclass for the bard, dealing with things that add proficiency or add modifiers to skills can become very, very broken very quickly, because bards get both Jack of all trades and expertise. So doing things like that can cause some issues if you're not kind of looking at, okay, well, let's see what everything else. Jack of all trades should be that. Jack of all trades, master of none. The bard shouldn't be able to do everything, because then the rest of the party feels kind of ancillary to the bard. You don't want that. You want everyone in the party to feel like they have their own niche where they're the expert and they get to do cool things, and everyone else gets to do other things. So yeah, just be careful when you're adding proficiencies into the things like that with Jack of all trades, or giving minimum rolls or just something like that, because Jack of all trades becomes really, really broken unless you put limitations on things like that. Finally, the final thing for the bard is Song of Rest. Basically, when people take a short rest, if they burn a hit die, they can get an additional bit of healing. It starts as a D6, eventually gets up to a D to 12. This is a one thing. So, for example, if your barbarian, you take a short rest, your barbarian decides to regain some hit points. But they haven't taken a ton of damage. So they use one of their d12 hit dice. And they roll that. Well, with Song of Rest, they can also add a single d6 to that at level 2. However, the fighter is going to do that as well, but they've taken a lot more damage, so they're going to roll 3 of their d10 hit dice. They still only get a single extra d6 from Song of Rest. Song of Rest is another one of those kind of interesting, forgotten, I guess is the best word for it, defining features, because it's never mentioned again in the class. Yes, it does level up, again, D8 at 9th level, D10 at 13th level, but nothing ever modifies the Song of Rest. And I don't believe it's anywhere in the subclasses either. Nothing happens to the Song of Rest. So it's a defining feature that is just forgotten and never used again. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of people kind of forget in 5th edition that short rests are a thing, unless you are something like a monk or a warlock that uses them to get resources back. A lot of people kind of forget short rests are a thing, or they don't use them quite the way that they're designed to be used. And even people that do use them a lot, they will generally use them to get back resources. They will completely forget that you can heal during a short rest, or that if you take a long rest, you only get half of your hit dice back on a long rest. So yeah, if you are homebrewing and you want to kind of modify things for Song of Rest, understand that the short rest is kind of underutilized in 5th edition compared to what it was supposed to be. From what I understand, when 5th edition was designed, it was designed that you would have, 6 to 8 combats in an adventuring day. You would probably take, between those combats, 1 or 2 short rests. In a lot of games, you're only going to have 1, 2, maybe 3 combats in an adventuring game, or none at all. And you won't take any short rests. You might take 1 short rest every few days. So understand, if you're going to modify Song of Rest, first of all, it's going to incentivize them to short rest more, which can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. Understand everything that is involved in encouraging the party to short rest more. And understand that modifying Song of Rest to make it like maybe adding more hit points to it or something like that, well, that's going to massively change how the party deals with the counters, because if they can get a lot more hit points back on short rest, first of all, they're going to short rest more often. Second of all, they're going to play much more recklessly because they have free heals effectively. If you add other aspects to Song of Rest, like maybe temporary hit points or something like that, understand what that's going to do in different situations. Temporary hit points can be useful, but they can also feel kind of useless if they happen only after a Song of Rest and they only give you, maybe a d6 of temp hit points. Well, that's, even at 2nd level, that is 1 attack that it's cushioning you against. And once you get to higher levels, it's really not going to feel as big. So understand that if you are homebrewing Song of Rest, that you're going to need to understand everything that a short rest involves. A short rest takes an hour, so make sure that whatever you do to modify Song of Rest is worth taking an hour out of your adventuring to the day to do it. Those are the defining features of the Bard. Like I said before, the big one that every single subclass deals with is Bardic Inspiration, followed closely by the Spellcasting feature. Not every single subclass deals with the Spellcasting feature, but it is the second most common thing. Normally it's going to be Bardic Inspiration. Let's see how the PHB subclasses modify the things, just to give you some ideas for homebrewing. So, The first subclass for the Bard in the PHB is called the College of Lore. The College of Lore is it's the college that Scanlan Shorthall did, and it is a remarkably fun. It is a remarkably fun subclass because there's just a ton of different things you can do with it, and it turns you into a very this is kind of the customizable subclass. We get into the features, you'll figure out why. So the first thing that you get with the College of Lore is bonus proficiencies. I mentioned before, giving bonus proficiencies with the Jack of all trades and expertise and things like that can get really dicey. That is what the College of Lore is built on, is they want this particular bard, like this is kind of your classic bard. They want this bard to be able to do a lot of different things, and they kind of balance it out in what I think is an interesting way. So with bonus proficiencies, they get three proficiency in three more skills. Now they do specifically say 3 skills of your choice, so you can't take tool proficiencies or anything like that. This has to be skills, but that really is going to mean that a College of Lore bard can fit into a lot more situations. The other thing that's nice about this is you choose your subclass at 3rd level. So if you do start at 1st level, by the time you get to 3rd level, you have learned your party significantly better than you did at 1st level when you were building this. You might not have even known who your party was when you were first building this character. Now you do know them, and with these additional proficiencies, you can take the exact proficiencies that the party just doesn't have, and they need someone to be able to do. So yes, the other thing that they get at 3rd level is called Cutting Words. When a creature you can see within 60 feet of you makes an attack roll, ability check, or damage roll, you can use your reaction to expend one of your uses of Bardic Inspiration. Roll a Bardic Inspiration die and subtract the number rolled from the creature's roll. You can use this feature after the creature makes its roll, but before the DM determines whether the attack roll or ability check succeeds or fails, or before the creature deals its damage. So, this is kind of the, I guess, balancing aspect, and this really is kind of the balancing aspect of the Bard, is you can add things to the Bard to make them really good, kind of solo-ish characters. The bonus proficiencies, they can do a lot of different things. And then you add in Cutting Words, which they can be very selfish and use it anytime somebody attacks them. But what generally tends to be a better idea is you use Cutting Words when your allies are getting attacked, to make sure that the allies that can't afford to get attacked are not going to have to deal with that. The other thing that's nice is you can do it on damage rolls. So if somebody gets attacked and it's like, oh crap, they can't take that much damage, you can do this, Cutting Words, and I'm going to cut the damage by 12. It does take your reaction, and that's a nice kind of balancing of ability. And this really gives a good example of a really simple way to modify your Bardic Inspiration. The base version of Bardic Inspiration is entirely focused on your allies. This gives you the option of being able to focus it on enemies as well. You can buff your allies or debuff your enemies using your Bardic Inspiration. It gives you a choice of, you now have to choose, okay, where do I want to use? Where's it going to be most useful? Is it going to be most useful to have my party hitting more often, or have the enemies hitting less often, or doing less damage, or failing ability checks? Now, this does specifically say ability checks, not saving throws. So if you are homebrewing and you want to kind of to change things up, changing this from ability checks to saving throws is a massive change. Ability checks, especially as far as combat is concerned, really, for the most part, the only ability checks you're ever going to see in combat are grapple checks, which are athletics checks and acrobatics checks, depending on whether you're initiating the grapple or defending from the grapple. So being able to ensure that an enemy can't make their grapple check, or If an ally is breaking from a grapple, these are all contested checks. So your ally will make a check, and the enemy will make a check. If your ally is trying to break it, they still have to beat the contested check. So this can be a really easy way of, okay, no, you're going to make it because of cutting words. So, and again, this is another thing that really your bard needs to know the party, and in this case, the enemies really well. Ensuring that the opportunity attack that the spellcaster makes against your the spellcasting enemy makes against your spellcasting ally doesn't hit, isn't really the best way to use that, because if they're just going to, conk them on the head with a quarterstaff and do 8 damage or something like that, compared to the dragon who's going to bite and do 30 damage with it, you need to understand where it's best to be used. And that's another thing that you can use when you're homebrewing is, depending on how you change Bardic Inspiration, what additional ways you get them to use it, one of the ways it can kind of inspire you is pick what you want the bard to be most knowledgeable about. If you want them to be focused a little bit more on learning about enemies and things like that, make it something that affects the enemies. If you want them to really know their party well, make it something that affects allies. If they want it to be something that they know themselves really know, make it affect really well. Make it affect themselves. That's a really useful tool in kind of customizing these subclasses. And that's one of the nice things about the bard is because they are that jack of all trades, your subclasses really kind of direct you into a specialization. And when you're designing a subclass, think when you're designing it, well, how do I want to specialize this bard? What do I want to encourage them to focus on? And build a subclass around that. And again, whatever you do to modify Bardic Inspiration is going to be a massive part of how you're going to direct them to do something. Moving on. At 6th level, you get additional magical secrets. You learn 2 spells of your choice from any class. This is effectively the 10th level ability, but they get it at 6th level. And again, this makes this particular subclass very, very customizable, and allows the class to really just kind of pick where they want to fit in. Are they the designated healer of the team? Okay, well, maybe pick something from the druid or the cleric's spell list. Have they turned into your damage dealer? Maybe take something powerful from the wizard, or maybe take one of the weird warlock's spells that are normally only cast using warlock's spell slots and do something kind of unique with them. For homebrewing, when you get to 6th level, a lot of these, the 6th level of ability is going to add some sort of utility to the class. It's generally not going to deal with Bardic Inspiration or anything like that. It's going to add some sort of utility. We'll talk about the College of Valor in a second, and the kind of obvious thing that it does. Yeah, additional magic secrets fits in with the class. They want to be as custom as they can be, and this just gives them even more customizability. They don't have to wait until 10th level to get any spell that they want. They can do it at 6th, and it means that as they level up, that's 2 extra additional spells that they're going to have, because they still get their 10th level magical secrets as well. So, finally, at 14th level, you get Peerless Skill. When you make an ability check, you can spend 1 use of your Bardic Inspiration. Roll a Bardic Inspiration die and add the number rolled to your ability check. So this is a more self-focused thing. Now you can use your Bardic Inspiration on yourself. It's specifically for ability checks, but this kind of combines that Jack of all trades and Bardic Inspiration by allowing you to effectively use Bardic Inspiration on your Jack of all trades. And this also, when you combine it with things like expertise, which they've had since level 3, and they have quite a few things that they're experts in by the time they get to the 14th level. This is another thing when you're homebrewing is understand if you give the bard the ability, like this one, to use their Bardic Inspiration on themselves, that means that they can make rolls that are physically impossible. If you have like a persuasion to check, or a 14th level, they have a 20 to their charisma. It's their casting stat, it's their main stat, and they're going to have that. So that's a +5 to a persuasion to check. They're probably going to at least be trained in it. So at for 14th level, that's a +5. So it's already a +10. Now you add expertise. That turns it into a +15 to any check, any persuasion check. You also add a Bardic Inspiration, which at 14 is a D10, but go one level higher. At 15, it's a D12. That means they could possibly have a +27 to their roll, meaning the maximum they could roll would be a 47 on a persuasion check. Again, an impossible roll in D&D 5th edition is a 30. DC 30 is meant to be impossible. They can theoretically get up to a 47 if they combine Bardic Inspiration plus expertise plus just having a good score in that ability already. So again, making this a 14th level ability, and that's a really simple way. If you do have something where you want to add something that could be kind of broken, put it in as their kind of ultimate ability of their subclass. The 14th level, they're already getting to the point where all classes are doing really crazy things. This is a good way to do that. They can't give it to themselves until they hit 14, and once they hit 14, they're succeeding anytime they want to succeed. So, yes. So that's how the College of Lore kind of modifies the things. The other subclass in the PHB is the College of Valor. This leans a little bit more into the older version of the Bard, which is a lot more aligned with the Rogue. College of Valor is a little bit more of your fighting Bard. You get bonus proficiencies. This is another thing that's really, really great if you're homebrewing to kind of steer the Bard into a certain play style, is give them different proficiencies. For the College of Valor, you get proficiency in medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. So they can wear heavier armor, they can use more powerful weapons, and they can use shields. So already this College of Valor Bard is going to be something that's a little bit more for frontline, and that might actually influence which spells they decide to take. They might, to the 10th level, they might decide to take Armor of Faith, because it increases their AC, so they can be right in the middle of combat, swinging that with an incredibly high AC. Other kind of buff type spells might be something that a College of Valor Bard does, so that they can fill a different role. College of Valor Bard also might be the tank of the party. You know, they might build themselves around the idea that they're going to be very tanky. They're going to have a very high AC. They can heal themselves, you know, things like that. So just with those additional bonus proficiencies, you have really kind of changed what this Bard is going to be doing. And that's what the Bard does best. You only get three levels of subclass features. You get something at 3rd level, at 6th level, and 14th level. So making sure that those things are able to differentiate enough is really important. Like I said, bonus proficiencies are great. And again, a lot of people will think, well, bonus proficiencies, well, that means, you know, more weapons and things like that. If I want them, that's the only thing you do. No, give them tool proficiencies. Make them really, really different. Give them proficiency in the healer's kit and some sort of benefit to using healer's kits. That'll change things massively. Give them proficiency in thieves' tools. Turn them into a more roguelike the thing. Like, there's a lot of different things you can do with proficiencies that will really kind of modify how the class plays. Give them a couple more languages. You know, all those things can be really interesting. The other thing that they get at 3rd level in College of Valor is Combat Inspiration. This is the other thing that can be really, really useful. A creature that has a Bardic Inspiration die from you can roll that die and add it to the number rolled to a weapon damage roll it just made. Alternatively, when an attack roll is made against the creature, it can use its reaction to roll a Bardic Inspiration die and add the number rolled to its AC against that attack after seeing the roll, but before knowing whether it hits or misses. So, Combat Inspiration can now turn into... And I talked about this before. A creature that has a Bardic Inspiration die from you can roll that die and add the number rolled to a weapon damage roll it just made. Not add the Bardic Inspiration die to the damage roll, add the number rolled. So this isn't something that doubles on a crit. And that is an important thing to know. Something that doubles on a crit, you're going to want to give to classes that get more attacks or have advantage more often because they're going to get the most benefit out of it. The alternative aspect, when an attack roll is made against the creature, it can use its reaction to increase its AC. Now, this only works against a single attack, but again, at 3rd level, you're looking at a D6. A +6 to your AC is pretty good. Now, it might be a +1, but it could be all the way up to a +6. And even just a +1 is a decent amount. However, by 15th level, that could be as high as a +12. So again, the way that they limit this is that you have to use your reaction, which means it can only be used once per round. So that's a really, really simple way. If you want to add something unique to the Bardic Inspiration, is tie it to the reaction, and that limits it to once per round. Alternatively, if you tie it to a bonus action, that will limit it to effectively once per round as well, because there's no way in 5th edition currently to get more than one bonus action. You can get more than one action. Action Surge from the fighter gives you an additional action, and it's not difficult to get. I believe it's the 1st level. It's a 1st level ability for the fighter. I literally just did the fighter, and I can't remember what it is. No, Action Surge is 2nd level, so you would need to dip 2 levels into fighter, but that's not a huge investment. But bonus actions, you only ever get 1. So when you are customizing things and adding new ways to use your Bardic Inspiration already uses a bonus action. So that does limit it. So if you are giving a new way to use Bardic Inspiration, you can have it also use a bonus action. You could turn it into an action, and that would mean you could use your bonus action for your traditional Bardic Inspiration, and then your new version of it, you could use it to your action. Or you can tie it to a reaction, and then it's something that generally is going to happen on other people's turns. So those 3 things, just choosing what kind of action you want to tie to this new way to use Bardic Inspiration, can vastly change how it's used. And again, with this one in particular, it doesn't use the Bard's reaction. It uses whomever has the Bardic Inspiration, and it requires them to already have the Bardic Inspiration. So this is another thing that you can do. This actually isn't increasing something the Bard can do. The Bard still does the exact same thing, where Bardic Inspiration, I give it to someone. It gives someone that is using the Bardic Inspiration an additional way to use it. So that's another route that you can go when you're homebrewing, is instead of giving the Bard new ways to use the Bardic Inspiration, give whomever they're inspired, whomever they inspire, a new way to use it. And this is a perfect example. Moving on. I'm going to take a drink real quick. 6th level, you get extra attack. Just because of action economy and everything, extra attack, that's how it works. This means that the Bard can go toe-to-toe a little bit more with the weapons-based classes. That also means, because the Bard is a full caster, you now actually have a choice between casting a spell and making attacks. Especially doing something like giving extra attack also incentivizes the Bard to start looking for magic weapons. Because magic weapons that whatever they do gives a benefit. Most magic weapons are going to give some sort of benefit to your attacks, whether it increases the attack rolls, additional damage, or some sort of kind of proc effect that happens when you make the attack. Adding extra attack incentivizes the bard or any class that has extra attack to start putting a little bit more emphasis on finding magic weapons. So if you want to, again, incentivize the bard to build itself in a certain way, simply adding extra attack will change how the bard focuses. Without extra attack, they're still a full spellcaster. They're going to be focusing on spells, so they're probably not going to be looking at a fling tongue longsword at all. They might want a wand of the war mage, or something like that. And just adding extra attack can go, oh, wait a minute, it might be useful for me to have this. And it'll also influence the spells that they choose. Something like Elemental Weapon is going to be more beneficial when you have 2 attacks instead of just 1 attack. So, yeah, again, you can highly customize your bard by just modifying how the subclass works. Every single subclass is going to point your bard in a certain direction. So when you're creating your subclasses, understand you should be specializing your bard. Because again, Jack of all trades, master of none is not going to be very fun to play because you're never going to feel really good at anything. You're just not going to feel bad at anything. So your subclass should specialize and make you fit into a specific role within the party. Finally, 14th level College of Valor, they get Battle Magic. When you use your action to cast a Bard spell, you make 1 weapon attack as a bonus action. So this kind of completes the idea of combining magic and martial ability. Now, anytime they cast a spell, they can also make an attack. That is going to change the spells that they choose. Because casting a fireball but using a sword is not really going to be great because you're going to cast the fireball, but then you have to run in unless you want to fireball yourself. However, casting a fireball and then shooting with a bow, that might actually work. The issue there would be the idea of having enough free hands to be able to cast the spell and things like that. All of those things you need to think about when you're doing this. If you want to create a kind of ranged bard, you can do it by just changing, like you now have proficiency in martial ranged weapons. And it'll change the entire way the bard thinks about themselves. Much more of a... I'm thinking Robin Hood, one of his merry men. What's his name? Will Scarlet. That's his name. Will Scarlet was a bard. He is kind of one of the inspirations for the bard was Will Scarlet, who is this character from Robin Hood who would wear scarlet. He would wear red, and he played the lute, but he also could fight really well, and that's one of the inspirations of the bard. So if you wanted kind of a more Robin Hood style thing, like Will Scarlet used a sword, but maybe you want a more Robin Hood ranged kind of a version, well, give them proficiency with longbows or short bows or something like that, or give them proficiency with throwing darts or something. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that you kind of specialize and do things. And again, battle magic is that kind of example of, okay, well, now we're going to give, and that's the other thing with it is you can make a weapon attack as a bonus action, but you also use your bonus action for your for your inspiration. So now they have the choice of, okay, do I want to inspire? Do I want to make an attack? So understand if you are making something a bonus action, it needs to be worth not using your Bardic Inspiration or any other bonus action thing you might have. So, yeah. Final thoughts. Again, the Bard is kind of an undervalued class. It's been the weird step-headed stepchild, or red-headed stepchild of D&D for decades at this point. It's always fit in a weird spot. Fun fact, the reason that Sam Riegel chose a gnome bard. At least the story that's been told that I remember, is he actually asked, okay, well, what's like the worst class? And they were like, I guess bard. Okay, and what would be like the worst kind of bard? Well, I guess gnome. So that's what I'm going to be. He specifically chose to play a suboptimal racing class. Like he wanted to be the one that was just not going to be very useful. And if anyone's watched the first campaign of Critical Role, without spoiling too much, you learn very, very quickly that Scanlan Shorthalt turned into one of the linchpins for Vox Machina. He had some of the greatest moments in the game. Because he understood the class and learned how to use it effectively. And so when you're homebrewing for it, understand your subclass for the bard is going to specialize them. It's going to direct them into a certain flavor of bard. So understand when you're building it, you need to be thinking about, okay, how do I want to change them from a jack of all trades into a specialist in a certain thing? And look at the other ones that exist there to give you some ideas. And don't limit yourself to Scanlan Shorthalt bards. You know, don't limit yourself to, it's a dude that sings and he's real silly and stuff like that. No, you can make very, very serious bards. You can make very, very stoic bards. You can make very, very stuck up and kind of hoity-toity bards that feel a lot more like a wizard. You know, think about how you want to change the bard, and your subclass is going to do that really, really well. Really, more than any other class, the bard gets hyper specialized by their subclass. Even compared to like the fighter, the thing that's going to customize your fighter a lot of times is going to be your feats and your subclass. The bard, their subclass is just going to do it for them, and it changes it drastically. That and your spell choice. So anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, remember, like, subscribe, turn notifications on in the comments down below. What is your favorite aspect of the bard? Either the 5th edition version of the bard or previous versions of the bard. Do you like the jack of all trades aspect? Do you like the inspiration aspect of it? Do you miss the old rogue kind of bards? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today, and I'll see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye.